A member of Sean Hannity's live audience cheered on the death of a New York City homeless person on a subway.
Take a look at your screen. After making violent threats, acting erratically, a mentally ill, homeless guy with a long history of violent crime was, well, subdued by a bystander, a 24-year-old Marine vet. Now, the homeless man, his name is Jordan Neely.
Hmm. So, wait a minute. Do you hear that? It's like a whooping woo. If it's such a tragedy, then how come people that are watching you seem to be pretty giddy about it? At least that person is. Well, it's because that particular person, and I'm not speaking for all Hannity viewers, but I mean, apparently it seems like they're okay with killing a homeless black man who's having a mental health episode. I mean, they're fine with the end result being the fact that he is dead, and have been coming up with different ways to justify it. So, of course, some of the justification that I've seen from people, for example, on social media, is, oh, well, he was a very dangerous person. Obviously, he was threatening people, he was being loud, he was being disruptive. He has a criminal record. Do you know that? Yeah, he does. Does that mean that that he had earned being killed? No. According to one eyewitness, by the way, who posted a video of the altercation on his Facebook page, Neely had allegedly yelled that he did not have food or something to drink. So no food or water, saying that he was ready to die and that he didn't care about facing life in prison. So now I look at that, and considering how he's an unhoused person, having mental health difficulties, if you have no home, if you have no food, you have no water, I don't know, prison's going to look pretty good to you. 3 hots and a cot, which is more than what apparently he had, and maybe some mental health care. And so, to me, that makes me think of how unbelievably desperate you would have to be to rather have your freedom being lost, to losing your individual freedom to be out and about in the world, having that be preferable to living in your current situation. So, I don't know, when I see this story, I see, empathy. I have empathy. I see situations like this happening as a failure of society, a failure of, taking care of people who are obviously mentally unwell and are having serious issues. Now, was he a danger, though? Was he harming people? Was the intervention justified? Well, according to that same witness, who told the New York Post, Neely didn't attack anyone in the car. So he wasn't attacking anyone. He wasn't a danger. The most aggressive, according to the witness, was taking off his jacket and throwing it to the ground. So there was no need to physically jump to the defense of subway riders because there wasn't anyone who was in danger from Neely that day. I mean, that's a pretty clear case, right? Now, Hannity went on to say and criticize Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who had, come out to defend Neely and call this a murder. So now Hannity said, quote, "This man was not the innocent street performer that AOC and her friends want you to believe." So look, this is what they do, right? So something like this happens. Someone dies, okay, needlessly. And the response is, well, they're no angel. They had it coming, essentially. Well, now wait a minute. Just the fact that Neely had been arrested multiple times, over 40 times. So, yes, he had some run-ins with the law. Does that mean it's justified to murder him? To kill him? No. And by the way, the 24-year-old Marine who choked him to death has been identified as Daniel Penny. And whether he meant to or not, the result is Neely is dead. And if we live in a just society with laws, well, there has to be some sort of consequences for that. Again, Neely was not attacking him, wasn't attacking anyone else. So, does it really qualify as a self-defense case? It is a case where, again, a chokehold was employed, leading to the death of the black man having a mental health episode. In this case, here, Neely is the victim. His criminal record doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter. Now, speaking of that record, a New York City police spokesperson told Newsweek that Neely's record had 42 prior arrests, dating between 2013 and 2021. They include 4 for alleged assault, while others involved accusations of transit fraud and criminal trespass. Okay. So now the alleged assaults, he was arrested and charged for them. So, as he should have been. Okay. Again, no one here is arguing, and AOC certainly didn't argue that he was an angel or a perfect person. No, the guy had a lot of problems. He had a mental breakdown. Is that worth losing your life over? Having a bad day? Because everyone, I mean, you could look at it this way. Everybody is one bad day away in this country from being murdered. One bad mental health day. That's disastrous. So this is what we're angry about, okay? This is what the left is mad about. Jordan Neely did not deserve to die, but he did, and there should be an equal application of the law. In this case, there was not. Daniel Penny has not been charged. I mean, if anything, I would look at involuntary manslaughter, at least. But no, there hasn't been any sort of investigation, no arrest. And Daniel Penny has also been defended by police officers and media figures, New York politicians as well. That's not right. His actions, whether he meant it to or not, led to the death of a man who did not deserve to die, and there should be some justice. That's all people are asking for. That's all people are asking for. So now why isn't there justice? Why isn't there? Well, it turns out the media has a pretty big part to play. Not just Hannity, but also, again, mainstream outlets and local news organizations. There are consistent stories about crime. I mean, crime, if it bleeds, it leads, right? So there are constant crime stories. There are left-wing outlets that are also focused a lot on crime stories. And one of the consistent refrains that we see is how New York City is a crime-infested hellhole. Well, it turns out that's not really accurate. But if you were watching the news and not lived there, you wouldn't actually know it. So let's go through some of the data. During the pandemic in 2020, the murder rate in New York City jumped. It jumped by 47%. Now, that was a huge, huge headline. Why? Because, well, obviously, that's a gigantic jump than it was. But it turns out that murders, even at this incredibly high point, were 80% lower than their peak in the 1990s. And since 2020, the murder rate in New York City has decreased way back down. By the end of 2022, according to data, city homicides have fallen to their lowest levels since the onset of the pandemic. Now, other crimes did go up in New York City, and no one here is going to deny the data. There's been a surge of robberies and burglaries, which contributed to about 22% rise in overall crime since the previous year. That said, is New York City one of the most dangerous cities in the country? No, it's actually one of the most safest cities in the country. New York City's murder rate has been consistently at or below the national average. Shootings are down 23% this year. The per capita violent crime rate in New York City is also lower than in many smaller towns in the South. And New York City is a gigantic city. Now, it's not to say, again, crime doesn't happen, but to paint New York City as a crime-infested wasteland is just not accurate. It's just not accurate. Now, when you blow crime out of proportion with panicky news reports, you get situations where people feel like, individuals, citizens, feel like they have to take the law into their own hands. Kind of like this situation. And it also, by the way, fuels negative stereotypes against the unhoused or people dealing with mental illness, addiction. A lot of times, those things go hand in hand. Now, I'm not saying that in some cases, unhoused people, people dealing with mental illness or addiction, I'm not saying they don't engage in criminal behavior sometimes. However, they're often more the victims of violent crime against them. According to a 2020 study published in The Lancet, unhoused people are at much higher risk of being the victims of crime and violence than people who are housed. Prevailing narratives about unhoused people being dangerous have also spurred, according to advocates, a climate of fear. So now, it's not good to downplay crime, obviously, but it's also very problematic when you overplay it. And I think that's what's going on here. The amount of crime that happens, and it does happen, is getting massively overblown in the media. And it creates this climate of fear, and it creates this climate of criminalization of especially unhoused people. Or, again, people dealing with mental health episodes and dealing with addiction. You really have to look at the numbers here. You have to look at the trends. And most importantly, when you look at the data, use it to come up with better solutions, humane solutions. At the end of the day, these people are human. They're human beings. And I believe every human should have stable housing, should have health care, should have mental health care, should have the basics needed to survive. I think those are all human rights. And unfortunately, we live in a country that does not provide those things.